Hey guys, Steven here, Fanatic Perspective. First and foremost, Merry Christmas. So thankful for you guys to be supporting this channel. We're out here in Frisco, Texas. Matthew and I are reunited. Here, we tried to get filming at the Star and get a really cool shot for you guys. As you can see, we're outside right now. But we actually got kicked out of the Star by the Dallas Cowboys security staff. They were very nice and told us we needed to leave politely. But here we are now, kind of a little bit away, closer to the street, so apologize for the audio. But today we're going to get into our Alamo Bowl preview, Utah versus Texas. We're going to be breaking down tail of the tape of the Utah football team and getting into just how we match up with them schematically and some things we can take advantage of, and then I'll give my prediction at the end of the video. But before we get into that, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors, Boss's Ranch. Guys, they are flying off the shelves here in Central Texas. This Red River Ranch flavor, I had to go to 4 different HEBs just to grab it. It's on back order. We'll be back stocked on the shelves after Christmas. No worries, but I appreciate all you guys helping support the brand. HEB, Cole Produce, you guys in Central Texas have been supporting the brand. We really appreciate it. Please continue. Let's jump into our prep. So guys, we're going against Kyle Whittingham, this Utah football team. Obviously, they're very disappointed coming off of a Pac-12 championship loss to the Oregon Ducks, where they got their ass whooped, really, 37-15, and an angry football team that we have coming to San Antonio to face us in the Alamo Dome. And then obviously the disappointing season that Texas has had, not getting back to the Big 12 championship game. Tom Herman, after the season, deciding to fire the offensive coordinator, or reassign the offensive coordinator and fire the defensive coordinator, Todd Orlando. So how do we stack up? And what can we expect from this football game? Now, I don't think Utah is going to come in here with the same energy that Georgia did in the Sugar Bowl last year in terms of the lack of professional manner. I think Utah is coming in here very motivated. And the reason why I say that, recruiting in Texas, we've been up against Utah here recently. They just took 2 of our commitments, and Ty Jordan and Van Fillinger, who both flipped successfully to Utah. We pursued Morgan Scaley briefly, at least, gauged interest until he leveraged us to re-sign a contract with Utah to remain as the defensive coordinator, potentially head coach in waiting. Cameron Rising last year decides to transfer to Utah. And then we recently flipped Jalen Ford, linebacker, from here in Frisco. There's a bunch of connections going on, Matthew. But we recently flipped Jalen Ford and get him signed on early signing day. So a lot of connections between us and Utah. And I'm really curious to see and check out how all that plays out in San Antonio on New Year's Eve. Now, going into the matchup itself, Zach Moss is the guy we got to pay attention to. Number 2 on Utah, the running back. He's phenomenal, and we've faced some really good running backs all year. I probably would say he's the second best guy we've faced after Chuba Hubbard of Oklahoma State. But that includes guys like a Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Kennedy Brooks, and some really good runners we've seen, even like a Puka Williams. But Zach Moss, it starts and ends with him in the offensive line. Very good offensive line for Utah. And then they're led by a senior quarterback in Tyler Huntley, watching the tape, Matthew, and breaking it down, I've been really impressed with his poise and his feet. Very quick feet back there. He's not a runner, though. He's a guy who uses his athleticism and his quickness to create big plays downfield, and he's very efficient with the football. 18 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions, and he's a guy who is a chain mover. They have been, I believe they're second in the country in time of possession. And so when you look at guys that, teams that dominate time of possession, quarterback play, and taking care of the football is essential to that. Being able to run the football, 3rd and shorts is where they thrive. I had a lot of fun watching Utah on film, breaking down some of their sets. They utilize a lot of 12 personnel. They have, their leading receiver is actually a tight end, and somebody we need to look out for, because Brant Kuthi, he's a sophomore, also out of, I believe, Katy, Texas, and he's a guy they utilize very similar. And y'all are gonna some of y'all are gonna cringe when I say this. They utilize him the way the New England Patriots used to utilize Aaron Hernandez, in terms of the jet sweeps, the handoffs. They use him as a running back. He will play a lot of H-back. They will move him all over the place. So that's a guy we need to look out for and just key in on throughout this football game, because I think it's somebody that can hurt us downfield. We kind of got gashed a little bit by a guy like a Charlie Kohler on Iowa State. But this is a guy who they'll utilize down the seams, and like I said, out of the handoffs and in the backfield, because overall he's their leading receiver at only 31 receptions so far this season. But they got a lot of guys with 20 or more, right? So just keeping everything in front of us and making Tyler Huntley beat us from the pocket, not letting him extend plays, is going to be very, very key. And that's something that Oregon was able to do successfully, because Utah will go spread, even on 3rd and 4s and whatnot. They will spread it out, but they want to spread and throw on their terms. When you make them throw against their terms and have to force the ball vertically and challenge the sidelines, he doesn't have that type of arm to challenge us. And we do have the speed and athleticism advantage here. So when I talk about speed and athleticism, I'm talking about how we match up with our secondary. Brandon Jones, B.J. Foster, DeMarvion Overshawn, Caden Stearns, and our corners. This is an advantageous matchup for them physically. They're not going to see a whole bunch of double moves and a lot of the stuff that they see regularly in the Big 12. I'm actually more concerned about linebacker play, and I'll get into some of the question mark things here I have in my notes, but linebacker play and defensive line play, and making sure we're honest with our eyes. Utah likes to move you out of the way. They do a lot of deceptive stuff. Even out of that 12 personnel, they'll go under center, single back, and play action, and they throw a lot to Zach Moss out of that set. They do some creative stuff where they'll have 2 tight ends and like an H-back, and then they'll motion them and play action off of that, and the guy will run a wheel route and they'll throw it back to him. All of that stuff is just being trained with your eyes and being synced up with our keys. The biggest thing is they're trying to get us, it's more of a mental game against them than it is physically. Teams like USC, teams like Oregon that had the athleticism up front matched with the mental, were able to have success and kind of slow down that Utah offense. None of them really shut down Zach Moss in this run game, because that offensive line is very, very good. But we can't also have them hold the football for 35-plus minutes, right? And I'll get to my keys offensively on what we need to take advantage of from a Texas standpoint. But overall, guys, like I said, this game is so important to me. Even for Utah standpoint, they've been recruiting like gangbusters here in the state of Texas. They get a bowl game here in the state of Texas. Those of you who watched the Duncanville North Shore State Championship game, Zachary Evans stupidly gets kicked out. His replacement, John Gentry, is committed to Utah, right? So, they're here on our soil in Central Texas. How do we defend our land, right? So I'm really, really excited for this matchup. The more and more I studied Utah, and the more I jumped into, some of the things I've been hearing out of our camp and our practices, and some of the things that, Chris Ash may be implementing defensively, moving to the 4-man front, getting a chance to see Malcolm Roach play his last football game here at Texas as a true 4-3 defensive end will be interesting. I think that's something, Matthew, we could take advantage of from a standpoint of being, they're not familiar with what this defense is going to look like. Now, granted, Craig Naivar will be calling the defense, but we'll start to see some of Chris Ash's, fingerprints on what we're trying to do, and also trying to set the tone for 2020. I said Texas Tech game. We're in 2020 now. The defensive line kind of got unleashed. Even that last game under Todd Orlando, Marquez Bimage, Taquan Graham, get an opportunity to truly rush the passer, not having to play stalemate football anymore, but being in attack mode. I think we'll have an opportunity to see more of that and getting Utah into passing down situations and just keeping contained on Tyler Huntley. We'll have a chance because athletically we can do that. If you look at the Oregon game, Kayvon Thibodeau, who had a monster game, and guys, you know, for those of you who follow recruiting, he was the number 1 recruit last year. He was a guy who had a monster game in the Pac-12 championship game against these guys. So athletically, and that's what I'm talking about, speed and athleticism, all 3 levels of defense. You know, I think we'll be able to compete, at least if we're able to get them and neutralize some of the run game stuff. But Zach Moss is a grave concern in the pass game as well as the run game. Now, just going through my notes, as we continue to study, what are some things we can do offensively looking at Utah's defense? Now, Utah's a team where, you know, Morgan Scaley, a guy we were going after, we're going to see them front and center. Now, Julian Blackman, who is one of their, you know, he was up for All-American consideration, one of their safeties, R.J. Hubbard, those guys won't be playing. And they struggled, again, in their Pac-12 championship. Justin Herbert was able to take advantage of some big plays downfield when those guys left the game. Can Sam Ehlinger take advantage of that? Can guys like a Brennan Eagles, Colin Johnson, if he plays, I'll get to Colin Johnson in a second, Devin Duvernay, can we continue to, you know, keep up some of the momentum we established in the Texas Tech game and finding getting back to our identity in the throw game that we got to in that Texas Tech game? Really curious to see that because against this Utah defense, Bradley Anae, he's one of the best pass rushers in the country. Number 6 on Utah, 6'3", 265, had 12.5 sacks this year. And he's good against the run and the pass. He's not just one of these guys who's, who only gets fired up on third down or obvious passing downs. He plays stout against the run as well. They have the number 1 run defense in the country. But as we saw against Oregon and C.J. Verdell, they can be had. As we saw even early with Oregon establishing some of that zone read quarterback run game, just keeping them honest. We got to get back to our 2018 Texas offense. Ball control, 12, 13, 14 play drives, trying to swing that time possession that I mentioned earlier. It's very, very critical here. Something Oregon was successful to do. And breaking down the tape too with how we play. USC beating Utah earlier in the year was able to get vertical and get some big plays. And it's funny, there's another similarity with Graham Harrell, you know, somebody that we were also pursuing who did have successful offensive output against this very, very vaunted Utah defense. What can we maximize with Sam Ehlinger and the guys I mentioned earlier? Utah's going to be bracketing Devin Duvernay. They've had a month to prepare for him. They know number 6 is our guy. He's our made man. What have our tight ends done in this offseason period trying to replace a K. Brewer to grow up, right? Because in order for our run game to work, we're going to have to be balanced and get some of those chunk plays so that we can keep the box light. And we're going to have to mix in quarterback run game, RPO. Everything has to be on the table. That's one of the things I loved about what Oregon did on their tape, how versatile they were in attacking Utah's defense from so many different platforms. Inside zone, outside zone. They ran some smash routes concept stuff off of play action. Those are some things we're going to have to utilize. I really hope Colin Johnson plays in this game. I really want it for him. I know he's had a very, very disappointing senior year dealing with the hamstring injuries and just some of the injuries he's had over the course of his Texas career, both for the Johnson brothers. But if we can get Colin Johnson to play, I have no idea if he's going to play or not, but I know Tom Herman did say he was going to try to give it a go. If we can get him out there, that's a guy that can win on the outside, whether he gets match up with the Jalen Johnson, number 1 on Utah, who's kind of their lead corner, and take advantage from a size perspective. Both he and Brennan Eagles, I believe, can win out there on Johnson. I've seen that on tape. And then on top of that, with the safeties being out, potential breakdowns, opportunities for big plays downfield. We know Ingram, we know Roshan, those guys are going to run hard behind our offensive line. It's a great challenge for the offensive line and Herb Hand dealing with the Utah 4-man front and what those guys present, especially like a Bradley and I that I mentioned earlier. Dylan Lloyd, who's their kind of their middle linebacker in there. He's a nuisance, leading tackler. He also has 5+ sacks on the season, outstanding blitzer on third down, and somebody that they will deploy from a ton of different angles up front that we have to be challenged with. We've had problems on our offensive line picking up stunts, communication. How have we worked on that? What has Herb Hand done with this group over the break to address some of those things? I'm hearing wonderful things out of camp from Andre Coleman and Jeremiah George on defense. Some of the problem areas we've had when we've heard all the off-the-field noise with the linebacker group and the wide receiver group. Those guys coming in as interim coaches, replacing a Todd Orlando, replacing a Drew Maringer. We've heard upbeat in practice. Kobe Boyce has moved over to wide receiver. Guys are out there making plays. We don't know what the hell is going to happen in this game from these with an upbeat Texas team. But it's also, like I said, it's 2020. Guys are playing for the spring to try to establish their spots with the new coaching staff. I'm not going to mention the young man from Ohio State who may be coming over to chime in as our new passing game coordinator, only because I don't want to jinx anything. That's in play right now, and Matthew's got his fingers crossed because I would be excited for that potential hire. But everyone wants to, we want to kind of assert our spots, especially if we're going to stay with this offense, which is good for a Sam Ehlinger going into his senior year. Let's keep the party going coming off of that Texas Tech game. So I'm just really excited to see all these guys perform. Just going through the notes, seeing BJ Foster and Overshawn maybe playing linebacker or in a 4-2-5 nickel look, and how they're deployed in this scheme, and matching up. Outside contain is going to be another thing I wanted to mention. Keeping Tyler Huntley, I know I said that earlier, but outside contain in general, something we've struggled with. I want to see if we've been able to get some of these guys coached up, because this is a big game. I mentioned Andre Coleman and Jeremiah George earlier. This is a big game for them. They're kind of auditioning to be coaches on the new staff, right? Even some of the guys that are here, like Oscar Giles and folks that we've had that are really, really good recruiters, setting the tone for 2020. I know all of us as Texas fans and those of us who are on this channel through this Christmas season, we've been focusing a lot of our content and our energy on the coaching staff, but we still got a bowl game to play, and both teams coming off of disappointment to end their season in very different manners. But one of these teams is going to be able to kind of springboard into the spring with a victory here. Now, I do want to get into predictions because it's kind of a head versus heart thing for me. My heart definitely says Texas. And I know this is a football game. If we're buttoned up and we play with the enthusiasm that I've been hearing about in these practices, we can win this football game. I saw how USC athletically was able to impose their will at times against Utah. Oregon definitely imposed their will athletically against Utah. But this Utah team is very, very good. They're shooting for 12 wins. Kyle Whittingham, also being of the Urban Meyer lineage, very familiar with the type of offense and the scheme that Tom Herman wants to deploy. And we are shorthanded from a coaching perspective right now. So my head says Utah 24-20 in this Alamo Bowl. I do think we'll be pleased as Texas fans with our performance. You can still make the argument, and I think Utah is still going to try to put their bid in to be a top 10 team at the end of the season. If we're able to compete here, and I'm not here for moral victories. Yes, I want us to win the football game. The last thing I want is for us to go 7-6 versus 8-5, even though I'm picking Utah here. And I want to get everyone's thoughts in the comments on their pick for this game. But I just think one of the edges that Utah will have over us is special teams, and that's been something that's bit us in the ass all year, that and penalties. And those are some things that Tom Herman long-term, when I say long-term, I'm saying into the spring, is going to have to address. Getting the penalties cleaned up, getting the special teams units cleaned up, because Utah's good, not great in special teams, but they are very, very good in the return game, and that's something that concerns me because there's a lot of similarities here to Kansas State. As y'all know, Kansas State house won against us. So I see special teams potentially playing out here as well, being one of the differences in the game. Maybe it can work out in our favor where it's a plus for us like it was for Oregon, where they were able to go out and block a punt. So I am picking Utah to win 24-20 in this bowl game, but I will not be surprised. I know Texas will hang in close. I believe the spread right now, Matthew, is like 7.5 for Utah. I do think we'll cover, but I don't think we'll be able to pull it out. But if we're able to win this football game and go 8-5, it'll be big for recruiting. like I said, we've had this little rivalry going on with Utah, so hopefully we can get the best of them. Guys, just want to finish off here by saying Merry Christmas and a little channel update. We are going to do, at the conclusion of the bowl game, I'll be back with Tran when I get back to Austin, since I'm here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area through the holiday break. When we get back after the game and we do our post-game bowl recap, we will go into our top 10 countdown. As we revamp the players for the season, that countdown list is going to be very, very different from our preseason top 10. So we'll do our top 10 Texas Longhorns for the season, and we're going to do a top 10 Texas players, best Texas players of the decade, right? So 2010 through 2019. We'll also do our top 10 players that have come through this program. A very disappointing decade for Texas football. This is the last football game of the decade for us. And hopefully we can close on a positive note. Everyone, enjoy your holidays. Enjoy your Christmas. Appreciate everyone. Appreciate Boss's Ranch for sponsoring these videos. Matthew, I appreciate you. It's good to be back together again filming. And the Star and the Dallas Cowboys for kicking us out. I still love y'all. And guys, Horns, always up.